All right. Good morning. Happy Saturday. Happy October. I think fall is actually here, since it's now hoodie season. But welcome. If you don't know, my name is Latavia Alexander. I am the owner and principal attorney of LA Legal Solutions, a law firm where we are focused on helping you build and protect your legacy. And we do this through education, making sure you understand why you're doing what you're doing, the how of what you're doing. Not just, we don't just prepare a document, we don't just do a service, but the big thing is making sure you understand why. Especially because, hey, I won't be with you every single day. I'm not always going to be able to be there to answer every single question. So I want to make sure you understand when it comes to your, if I'm working with an entrepreneur and it's something for your business, then in a contract that you understand what the contract says, you know how it functions, when to use it, how to use it, why you use it, as well as for those when we're talking about a legacy planning, making sure you can read and understand your plan and it matches what you said you wanted and you know how to tell other people about it. So, with all that in mind, that is why this series was created, Legacy Conversations, where I come to you once a month to talk about a different topic. And this month, I want to just kind of take a pause. I've covered a lot of different things over the last year, but just kind of take a pause to and revisit some what I like to call myths or misconceptions about estate planning. Some of these, I'll say, it's kind of like frequently asked questions or more reasons as to why people don't do estate planning or why they put it off. The first being time. It's this misconception that we've got time. I'll do it later. I'll get to it, oh, not right now. I'm going to wait until this thing happens. And I'm guilty of it myself. Like, oh, I started it. Oh, well, you know what? Let me wait and see how this situation pans out. Or well, right now I don't have anything. I don't have any assets. I said that myself for a long time. It's just me and my debt. There's nothing that's whatever. But even I was wrong in my ignorance of that because if we're alive, we have something worth planning for, even if it is just doing the power of attorney or advanced medical directive, or and a will as well. Just even if you feel like you don't have assets or you don't have the things that you like I said, and that's the other misconception is that we have to have a certain amount of stuff or a certain amount of money to create an estate plan. And that's just not true. So like I said, time, we don't know how much time we have. Tomorrow is not promised. So you want to make sure we're taking advantage of today of the time that we have now, but also prepare as though although tomorrow is not promised, we want to take advantage of the time we have now and to put a plan in place for tomorrow, for the future, for ourselves as well as for our loved ones. So time, and then the other one, like I said, is just this misconception that you have to have a certain amount of things. Um, a certain amount of things to be able to make a plan. And that's just not true. Like I said, if you're alive, you need to make a plan. Um, whether you own property or not, even if you just, what some people feel like, oh, it's simple, is I just own my car and I know it's going to go to my spouse or it's going to go to my children. That may be the case, but if you don't let people know that, if you don't know the process for that, that so-called simple thing could create a big headache for your loved ones. Like I've had a lot of people recently reaching out because it's a car that they want to get titled in their name. And my grandmother, my mother, whomever left the car to me, and they're going through trying to figure out all these different processes, excuse me. And it's really no, you're gonna have to go open an estate and go through the probate process so that the estate can transfer ownership of it. And this is one of those things that where I say, hey, having a plan in place or being proactive comes in handy because granted, yes, you can leave it through the will and go through the probate process, but the good thing about most states is in Maryland, it's the Motor Vehicle Administration. Most states, it's the Department of Motor Vehicles. So MVA, DMV, wherever you live, most of those agencies have it set up to where you could do a transfer on death title for your vehicle So that saves time and money for your loved ones after you pass away, because whether there's a will or not, without that transfer on death title or designation in place, they're going to have to go through the probate process to transfer title, transfer ownership of a vehicle. So that's something else. Like I said, there's no set amount of things you need to have to be able to do a plan. The other big misconception is if I talk about it, it's going to happen. And I don't know where that came from. I get that, words have power and we need to speak life or be mindful of what you speak about, but talking about death or talking about what you want to have happen after you pass away doesn't make it happen any quicker. We are all going to die at some point. We don't know when, we don't know the circumstances, but we do know that it's going to happen. And so it's better to have these conversations and get things sorted, as try to have as best of a plan in place as possible to minimize stress. Or I like to believe it minimizes stress for yourself, but definitely for your loved ones after you pass away, because they're not trying to figure out, well, what did she want? What did he want? How is this supposed to be done? Where do we go? Um, it's you kind of already you've laid that out. And so it's, hey, if you are a person who you take care of your family, you want to make sure they're good while you're alive, then hey, let's go ahead as a part of that, have that conversation with them so that you can put some things in place so that way when you pass away, they are still taken care of, or at minimum, they're not scrambling trying to figure out how to do things. Because when someone passes away, there's a grieving process regardless. So it's already going to be difficult, but grieving on top of trying to figure out, well, did they have a will? Did they have a trust? If so, where is it? What does it say? Now, if I don't understand it and I never had heard any mention of it, now I got to go try to hire somebody to figure out how to do it. It's just more stress and anxiety on top of already grieving and figuring things out. So, talking about it, as uncomfortable, as unsexy as it may be, it's necessary. So, like I said, that's why I'm here, because I don't always like talking about it, but I do like talking about it. If you couldn't tell, because since this is what I do for a living. But my biggest thing, like I said at the beginning, is I want us to be able to I want to provide the education, the information and I figure the more I talk about it and try to just make it more relatable, the more comfortable you will be having the conversation with yourself as well as with your family and friends. So, like I said, so far we've covered time, the time is not, we don't have an abundance of time. And in a matter of like, I don't have enough. It's not about how much or how little you have. You're alive. There's a need for a plan. And the third is talking about it is going to make it happen. And then the fourth one I want to talk about today is this thing of just, I'm hearing a lot about taxes, and I need to, why you need to have a trust versus a will, if you have one. And more I'm hearing that a will isn't worth it, or someone told me they were told a will isn't worth the paper it's written on, and it saddens me to hear that, because that is an effective tool. And now a will may not be the most effective planning tool for everyone, but it is still an effective tool. And trust are great, and they do help minimize and or avoid probate and in taxes, some of the taxes you may have to pay. But the big kind of what I'm getting at there is the misconception or misunderstanding is these taxes. Yes, the federal and the state, they're gonna, tax wise, they're gonna get what's theirs and what's owed. But a lot of this talk about avoiding paying like estate tax or inheritance tax doesn't even, those taxes don't apply to the vast majority of us, because the exemption for those taxes start federally, it's upwards of $10 million. Or it's 5 million individually, or 11 million, 10 million for a couple. And it varies by state. So if you're not someone who has a net worth of 5 million, um, the taxes you're trying to avoid don't even apply to you. And like I say, I don't say that to say not to get a trust because a trust is a very effective tool, but it is one that it costs more and it takes more time and planning to create and implement. And there's also just more moving parts to it. So I don't just, I encourage people, have the conversation, figure out, hey, which one makes the most sense for you. But it's also a matter of, hey, right now, if there aren't a lot of assets or you're not necessarily trying to do a lot of long-term planning, a will may be sufficient for you right now. Because any plan you have, it's not one where I just put it in, I set it and forget it. What works for me today and 3 years from now, because I'm believing for a great increase, a will may not be as effective for me 3 years from now as it is right now. But right now, it's better that I have a will in place where it is at minimum outlining my desires and my instructions for what I want to have happen after I pass away. So hey, I got to avoid taxes. I want to avoid probate. Have a conversation with an estate planning professional and talk to them about your specific situation and goals. And from there, figure out what makes the most sense for you right now. Because probate, yes, it can take a long time, but it can also be pretty short, depending on the size of the estate, what needs to be distributed, where you are. And the cost also is going to vary because most states have what they've done is because they know no one, no estate is created equally. They have options for, a process for a small estate, a regular estate, or a large estate. And the cost of those vary based on the size of the estate, the length or the amount of steps involved in that process vary based on the size of the estate. So ask the questions, have the conversations, figure out what makes the most sense for you. And the last myth I want to talk about today, it kind of encompasses all of these, but it's just going to go to, basically everything's going to go to my spouse. Everything's going to go to my children. So I don't need it. And in some cases, that's true. And I bring that up because every state has what's called the Intestate Succession Act. And what that means is if someone to die intestate means you did not have a will or a trust in place. You did not have an estate plan in place. And so what each state has done is say, hey, if you pass without a will, we've essentially come up with a plan or a flow of how we think your assets, your estate should be distributed based on what we think applies to most people. And so the default is if you pass if you have no spouse and no children, generally it's going to go to your parents if they're living or distributed amongst your siblings. If you pass with a spouse and no children, it's going to your spouse, partial to your parents. With a spouse and minor children, there's a division, and it's, spouse passed with children. And so every state has almost essentially like it can be broken down into a chart. If this happens, then if this is the safe act, then these things happen. And that can work for some people, but it also can cause confusion and chaos, especially if you are not as close to your blood relatives as others. And so if you're estranged from your parents or estranged from your siblings, but you don't have a plan in place when you pass away, your estate, your assets could end up going to your siblings who you didn't necessarily have a relationship with or didn't really want to go to them. And that actually happened with Prince when he passed away. He didn't have a will, and his estate got distributed among siblings, some of which he, did not normally interact with. Um, and thinking of my own family, when one of my uncles passed away, he worked for the state. He had a pension, and he didn't own a house, but he had a car or two. And I remember hearing family members, just kind of saying, hey, oh, such and such is supposed to go here, is going to go there, supposed to go to this cousin or that niece or that nephew. And I remember telling my mom that, like, actually, none of that's happening. It's all going because he wasn't married and he didn't have any children. And my grandmother was still alive. And I just remember telling my mom, I'm pretty sure my grandma's gonna get everything. Like, if she decides to let so and so have this or that, that can happen. But as far as the state's concerned, or, the register of will, when they look at it, everything's going to grandma. And, they thought I was exaggerating, but when everything was said and done, that's what happened. And it worked out that he and my grandmother were very close. And I think that he would have wanted her to be taken care of, but it did cause some confusion and kind of a little tension in the family for a brief period of time because it was just like, hold up. Well, he said he wanted me to have this or he would have wanted me to have that. And it's like, that may be true, but from a standpoint of, legal ownership, that wasn't the case. So there are rules in place, but it's not, make sure you're aware of what the default terms are for your state because if it is, hey, it's gonna all go to my spouse or to my children, and you're fine with that, that's okay. Maybe you are willing to take that risk. But for those who, because I know a few people who they have children, they're not their biological children, but they've raised them as their children, and for all intents and purposes, that's their child, and they have every intention of leaving things to those children, but they don't have a will in place. And so I've been sharing, like, hey, if you don't get a will or a trust in place, and you pass and there's nothing in writing stating that this is your child, they may end up being disinherited. And if for some reason they have some type of falling out with your other children, may end up with nothing when you meant for them to have just as much, if not more, as your biological children. I always use Cinderella as an example. I don't know the full backstory of Cinderella and her father, but from what I, know of the story, my thought is he did make sure there was enough, property and financial resources to make sure his family was taken care of if he were to pass away, because clearly they were doing well, but there was no real instructions or things, protections put in place for his biological child. Because if you've seen Cinderella, read it, seen the movie, any variation of it, the wife was left in charge of everything, and she treated her daughters a certain way, and she made sure that Cinderella was clothed, housed, and fed, but completely different conditions and treatment, and almost as though she was doing her a favor. And so that's a situation where I say, hey, if he had been a bit more proactive or intentional in his planning, Cinderella as we know it may not have happened. So just remember, like, yes, there are default, what you think is going to happen may not always be the case. So make sure you're taking the time to learn what the rules are for your state and how it works, because you just never know. And it's better to be informed and make your plans based on from a place of knowledge as opposed to a place of assumed knowledge. I think in the Bible it says, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And so I have learned these things, and I feel like it's part of my duty or my mission to make sure that I'm sharing that information with my community. And you all are a part of my community. So, like I said, those are just five of the myths, misconceptions that I've heard, I've fallen prey to myself over the years. But now that I know better, I want to do better and share so that you all can do better as well. So I don't see any questions right now. But like I said, those are just, I wanted to revisit that for this month. If you have specific questions about the myths, misconceptions, or specific questions about some aspect of estate planning that has not already been addressed, or that you would like me to answer, next month, I am going to focus on answering some of to this month we talked about the myths, but next month I want to focus on answering questions that you all have about aspects of estate planning, about how property is transferred when someone's passed away, how to maybe set something up, or what language to use, or if you've had things done and hey, I need it reviewed, I want to know how this works. Whatever the questions are, send them to me. You can post them in the comments. You can send me a message on Facebook, or you can email me those questions at info@lalegalsolutions.com, and that is solutions with a Z at the end. But like I said, comment here on Facebook or on the YouTube page. Send me a DM or email and let me know your questions. I look forward to hearing them. And like I said, next month, I will be taking the time to answer those questions. But I thank you all for listening. Remember, if you have questions, if you're ready to start working on your plan, feel free to reach out. You can do so by scheduling a consultation through the website, lalegalsolutions.com. You can email me, that same email address I provided. If you're looking for just other information, like I said, this will be here. This video is being recorded, will be posted to the LA Legal Solutions YouTube page, so you can watch it and previous videos. For my entrepreneurs, I do have the Legacy Builders membership program where it is a flat fee for monthly access. You get a monthly consultation with myself, a discount on legal services, as well as a business audit, and access to some contract templates. We also have contract templates available for sale on the website. So just take a look. Like I said, if you have any questions, let me know, send them out. Otherwise, I will see you next month. Thank you and have a great Saturday.